Many people have noticed an education gap in students after COVID. In this video, I will be interviewing some teachers at Monomoy High School to see their perspective on the education gap and how they think it has affected them and their students. How has the education gap affected your department?
Well, I think what's happened is I didn't notice it quite as much this year, but for the 2 years before, I had students that were coming in 8th grade that weren't really prepared to use a library. And I think some of that had to do with during COVID, when they were in middle school, they weren't able to go into the library and actually use everything in it with COVID going on. That's one thing. And I think another thing that I notice with some of the upperclassmen is sometimes I feel like they want to take shortcuts more than they used to take shortcuts. And I don't know what caused that, so.
So I think the education gap has affected us because we've had to do more looking at students and saying, where are the gaps and when do I need to reteach things? So when I'm teaching a topic, I'm going through, I'm kind of assessing if students remember the content, and if they don't, I'm taking time to reteach that. So it's a lot of taking the information that students are learning, seeing what they remember, and adding in the things that they don't.
It's pretty severely affected my our department. Students have been coming in with much fewer skills than they would have normally had in previous years. A lot of these are just like simple arithmetic skills, the ability to add and subtract numbers, the ability to sustain a intellectual pursuit for long periods of time has been greatly diminished. Like, I used to be able to have students read a chapter before they came into school, and now getting anything done outside of school is very, very difficult. And even in school, I find that students do not have the skills they need to understand the concepts that I'm trying to teach because their foundations are so shaky in basic maths and basic understanding of sciences.
I know the biggest thing that we realized this year, and it was interesting from the 9th graders' perspective, I always do a questionnaire at the beginning of the year, and the 9th graders, well, all of the upperclassmen had said, "Oh, we didn't get as many 8th graders for band specific. We didn't get enough 8th graders for band." And I said, "Well, guys, we had a pandemic," and the 9th graders, I have a huge group of 9th graders who are all awesome. They were like, "Yeah, but we all got here." And I said, "Yeah, but think about it. You had already been playing your instrument for a year when the world shut down. The current 8th graders had only been playing their instrument for half a year." So I've noticed that was very difficult. And I know we were fortunate enough to have like band over here spread out 10 feet apart, all the things. And select choir ran, but chorus did not. And we got very creative with select choir. But in terms of feeding the high school music program, they did not have music like chorus or band ensembles for 2 years, a year and a half. So that has definitely taken a big hit. And that also affects the musical in terms of having a really big pool of people, which everything's starting to creep up again. But that was, I think, the biggest part of it. Also, we've had this conversation in select choir about during COVID, people only hung out with their tiny little group of their little pot of people, and people forgot how to communicate with each other, and people are very scared to take risks, which the performing arts are all about, taking risks. That is my biggest takeaway on that one.
Do you think that students read more or less now for their own entertainment compared to before COVID?
Well, I noticed when we first got back from being isolated that students were coming in and they were coming in with books in hand. And I had some students that were telling me that they read a lot while they were at home. And it seems to have dissipated a bit. I wonder if it's that people are not reading the print books as much, but are reading online books. There are just so many different ways to get books now than there used to be too. So anyway.
It's a great question. I personally am not sure I can make a great judgment on that. I probably see as many students reading in, before or after class as I have seen in the past, but I would say in general, probably more. I think that it was a hobby that some students came up with prior to or during COVID that I see more often.
I don't really know. I know I definitely have some students who are avid readers who are constantly reading books. That's what I was like when I was a kid. And then I definitely have students who I don't think probably read very much at all, even the stuff that I assign them. But I would say overall the amount of students who are constantly reading is much lower than before the assignment.
Far less. And I chalk that up to, I wish I had my phone with me so I could do this at the camera. I think we've turned into we are all so addicted to our phones, and it's way easier to just scroll on your phone and look at videos, look at cooking videos. I'm just as guilty, any kind of cooking and food video, things like that, than pick up a book, which is sad. I try to read as much as I can.
Do you think that the education gap was caused solely by COVID, or were there other factors involved?
I think there might have been a few other factors going on. I mean, the isolation was not helpful at all because people were staying at home by themselves, and if they had parents that had to go to work during the day, I think it made it difficult for people to manage time, and there was a lot of people thinking things were optional, because remember when we were first in isolation that you didn't really have work, and we were told not to give work. And I think that we're turning a corner on that now, but at first that was a big problem. And I mean, social skills really impact a lot, and I've been seeing people come in the building that they've kind of lost some of that, communicating with people face to face, and because they were doing so much online.
So many other factors. So I think that COVID was a huge one. I think that, being home, missing school, not being accountable for things, that was huge. And, it affected everyone. So there's gaps in every industry. But I also think there's a lot more to that. I think that we live in a digital world, and I think the idea of having our phones all the time and constant, just constant things distracting us, constant things that are kind of part of our life that don't always push us towards education. I think that has a huge effect on students' learning and their motivation to learn and their understanding of topics. So I think that it's a lot bigger than just COVID. I think that there's so many other factors. I think that, home lives are a factor, how conducive are home lives to it, how conducive are time amounts with jobs and with sports and things like that. There's so many more factors than just COVID.
I think COVID exacerbated a situation that was already starting to happen. I think, honestly, I really believe that cell phones and the use of technology is really one of the main culprits. Just students being able to constantly look things up on their phone, students being constantly on their phone and distracted by their phone has severely limited their ability to do things without their phones. I mean, like a pure example, it's called mental offloading. I used to, when I grew up, I had all of my friends' phone numbers memorized. I knew probably about 30 or 40 people's phone numbers by heart, so I could go and I could call them. As soon as I got a cell phone, the cell phone remembers the numbers for you. And so right now, I know 3 phone numbers. I know my phone number, my wife's phone number, and I know the phone number of the childhood house where I grew up in. And that's it. And I think that a lot of that is happening with students as well, with the use of technology is actually retraining their brains in a way that makes them not as able to sustain higher intellectual pursuits.
Absolutely not. COVID, it was definitely broken before COVID, and COVID absolutely squashed it into the ground. And again, people who know me well, students, other people, my technology skills are very low to begin with. So I tend to be the anti-technology person. COVID forced me to get far better at it. But that's, I feel like technology, as we brought more and more of it into the school system, into learning, that's when things started to go downhill.